All right, good evening, everyone. Welcome to Tuesday Night Tomfoolery. I am one of your hosts, Sanjay Prasad, along with
Evan Mercer.
and unfortunately, our colleague Lee Johnson won't be able to make it tonight. He's fallen a bit ill, but hopefully he'll be back next week. So first off tonight, we'll be going over last week's games, starting with the upset of Texas A&M by Mississippi State, 35-28.
I couldn't believe my eyes when I saw this, Sanjay. I mean, Texas A&M losing to Alabama is one thing, but losing to a scrub team like Mississippi State, I mean, their quarterback, Nick Fitzgerald, he's nothing special, and then he just all of a sudden goes off against his A&M. They're supposedly good A&M defense.
I'm right there with you. When I saw this score, I was incredibly shocked. Some of us, like on our staff, had this team in their top 5. They thought this was going to be a national championship contender, a playoff contender, and they go and lose to Mississippi State. And while a little bit of that can be put on their quarterback being knocked out, Trevor Knight being knocked out in the middle of the game, and his replacement not having that same spark on offense, not being able to light the game up with his legs and only relying on his arm, and allowing the Mississippi State defense to play a little bit better in that regard. But still, this should not happen to a team that's supposed to be this good.
Considering the caliber of A&M's defense, this should have still been long in A&M's ballpark. Instead, they choked it away. I think it's safe to say they're out of the playoff race.
They have to be at this point. This was, at best, a middle-of-the-pack SEC team, and you cannot lose to teams like this when you're trying to go for that playoff, when you have playoff aspirations. Like, as a note, like, Texas A&M's defense was supposed to be incredibly good, but they allowed over 360 yards of rushing offense by Mississippi State. You can't. This shows some holes at maybe their linebacking core, on their defensive line. They're going to have to fix these things with either coaching or some new players if they want to have a real shot next year of going to the playoffs.
So this begs the question, Sanjay. Is Mississippi State actually decent, or is it just one big flub by A&M?
I don't think Mississippi State is actually good. I think this was less Mississippi State beating A&M and more A&M losing to Mississippi State. They allowed a lot of mistakes. They couldn't quite get it done in the air and they couldn't quite get their running game going, and their defense just did not show up at all. So I think this is more on A&M than it is on Mississippi State.
I'm going to go the other way instead. I think Mississippi State really showed themselves that they have the talent to start competing with the SEC West now. I mean, they got Ole Miss at the end of the year, and I think that'll be the big test to see maybe we are an SEC West caliber team. I think A&M, they choked it away big time, but I think it's more indicative of Mississippi State and what they can do. But only time will tell.
That's true. That's going to be interesting. But moving on to some of those SEC West teams they're going to be competing with, this week featured a defensive slugfest between Alabama and LSU, remaining 0-0 until the fourth quarter, where Alabama finally won 10-0. What do you think about this game?
I think, obviously, we knew Alabama was going to do great in this game. Defense shut down all the time. You know, offense is going to struggle a little bit. What really impressed me about this was LSU's defense. I mean, Alabama, they've been blowing up teams in 30 to 40 point difference. Instead, LSU held them to a 10-point difference. Now, obviously, their offense has got some work to do. I mean, Danny Etling and Leonard Fournette, you think a combo like that would be able to get some yards and get some points on the board. But, I mean, Alabama defense is showing once again they are the team to beat.
That's true. Alabama's defense showed us exactly what they've been showing all season. They are dominant, and they can stop almost any offense they face. But on the other side, we did see that huge surprise with LSU's defense. They held this usually pretty explosive Alabama offense to only 10 points and not allowing any until the final quarter, with Jalen Hurts only getting 107 yards in the air, but still managed to get 114 yards on the ground, which for a quarterback, still pretty good, along with the rushing touchdown in the fourth quarter. And then finally, just while the LSU defense did do well, they are not on Alabama's level. Alabama got 216 yards of rushing this game. LSU, 33.
So, Sanjay, let me ask you this question. You know, LSU hung it really close with Alabama. 10 points, that's the best we've seen against Alabama. Does this mean LSU is possibly a top 10 team? Could they beat Auburn, maybe hang with the likes of Clemson? What do you think?
This is going to be interesting because LSU so far this season really hasn't shown that they are one of the top teams in the SEC, but all of a sudden only a 10-point loss to Alabama, one of the closest games they played all season. I think it shows that their defense is much better than everyone thought. But I don't think you could be a top 10 team when you're getting shut out by another top 10 team. You need to put at least some points on the board, be it a field goal, maybe one touchdown. You need something. You can't just get shut out by a defense that, while is very good, should not be allowing you 0 points.
Mm-hmm. I mean, Kentucky put up at least 3 points. You think LSU would be slightly better than that?
You'd hope. You'd hope.
But let's talk about another SEC game, the last of the SEC matchups we'll talk about. We saw Arkansas completely exposing number 10 Florida this week, 31-10. Florida, you thought LSU had a bad rushing game with 33 yards. Florida had only 12 rushing yards, okay? I mean, that's pretty embarrassing, especially when you're talking about Arkansas' porous defense.
That's true. This Arkansas team, they confuse me. One week, they'll show their defense, it shows up, it limits Florida to 12 rushing yards, and on offense, they're all going off. Brandon Allen does well in the passing game, and then the running game opens up with Arkansas getting 223 yards on the ground against Florida. And then other weeks, you have games like their game against Alabama. They couldn't get anything going on the ground. They couldn't pass, and their defense just got exposed. So I'm not sure about this Arkansas team, but I think it says worse things about Florida than it does about Arkansas.
Do you think this is the beginning of the end for the Florida team? I mean, they were riding pretty high at 10. Whether they deserve that position or not, I disagree, but do you think it's time for the collapse we all been expecting?
I don't know if it's going to be a complete collapse, but I do think this is going to be a correction for Florida. They should not have been ranked in the top 10. They're good. They're not great, so they shouldn't be that high. They're probably going to be set a bit lower, maybe around the 16s, the 17s, where they belong. Although the real issue for them is going to be the fact that their quarterback, Luke Del Rio, is now out with injury. So it's going to be interesting to see how their offense does without him at the helm.
We saw an example of that. Austin Appleby, the senior quarterback for Florida, he played against Vanderbilt. You know, their score was 13-6. So, you know, you kind of know what you're getting with here, and I think it's not going to be any better for Florida.
True. And then on the other hand, what do you think this says about Arkansas? They've been inconsistent so far, but do you think this is them finally getting on the right track, or are they just having another good week?
I think overall, Arkansas is a good team. I believe in them. I mean, Austin Allen, he's shown himself to be at least an average quarterback, having some above average performances. They got a great running back in Raleigh Williams III. You know, they have a good offense, and it's a defense that really confounds me sometimes. And I would really like to see them build upon that. But overall, you have a 6-3 record. You beat teams like TCU and Ole Miss. You lost to teams like Alabama. I think, overall, you're in pretty good shape.
That's true. It's looking like they're a good team, and we'll see, like, in the coming games if they're a really good team or if they're simply going to revert back to average. And finally, a game I've been dreading talking about, Nebraska's absolute slaughter by Ohio State, 62-3.
We saw a lot of slaughters this weekend, like Washington over California, but this one takes the cake.
Honestly, it was painful to watch. Nebraska's quarterback, Tommy Armstrong Jr., went 9 of 33, 126 yards, 2 interceptions, both of which returned the other way for touchdowns each time. So honestly, this Ohio State defense, it was mad. It wanted to show that it was not the average unit everyone started to think they were, and they made a statement. They held a usually good Nebraska offense to 3 points, a field goal in the first quarter, and then it was all downhill from there. And on the other side of the ball, J.T. Barrett put an absolute performance, almost 300 yards in the air, 4 touchdowns. This black shirt offense could do nothing to stop them.
You know, at least the Nebraska offense scores some touchdowns, just not for the right team. But I think while Ohio State had a dominating performance, I wouldn't go far to say that it was against a good team. Nebraska, I think, their offense, especially with Tommy Armstrong going down for the week, I think their offense has been mediocre at best, and with the average of being worse. They haven't had a great running game. Their running back, Newby, only got 43 yards this week, and he hasn't been that great in past weeks as well. So I don't like the Nebraska offense, and obviously the defense, they just completely shattered against the Ohio State offense.
That's true. This match really raises some questions about this team. We thought that Nebraska, they had a good offense. The running game, questionable at times, but usually Tommy Armstrong was accurate enough, and with his bevy of absolutely amazing receivers, could bail him out in certain situations. But here, when they played one of the best teams in the country, all of that came to an end. So we're really going to have to see in later weeks as Nebraska plays through its schedule and maybe goes to a bowl game to see if they really are, if this was just Ohio State making a statement or if Nebraska being worse than they were.
I mean, we talked about this a couple of weeks ago. We knew that Nebraska was going to have a brutal schedule with Wisconsin and Ohio State, and they did not come out looking good at all. I mean, even if you come out with losses, if you hold them close games, you can still say, oh, we're a good team. I did not see good teams in this game at all.
That's true. This game really sort of shadowed, like you said, you could still come out of a game feeling like you're a good team, like that loss against Wisconsin in overtime. You thought, okay, they played these guys close. Wisconsin's a good team, played close games against the Michigan and Ohio State, but now we're not sure.
All right, so that's the games we had for last week. Let's talk about the games we have on this upcoming Saturday. So the first one, and I'll be blunt about it, we don't have that many great games to talk about this week. So first game, we have Baylor at Oklahoma. You know, Baylor, they're on a 2-game losing streak against TCU and Texas, and Oklahoma is riding hot right now. So who do you have in this matchup, Sanjay?
I'm thinking Oklahoma can ride its momentum to win out this game because even 2 weeks ago you thought Baylor, they're undefeated. They look like they had the Big 12 in the bag, but then they lose to Texas. They lose again this week. I'm not sure this team is actually as good as we thought. They never really had a good defense, but you thought their offense would be good enough to make up for it. They're not. I don't think they're quite there, and I think Baker Mayfield and this Oklahoma offense can just go to town on this quite porous Baylor defense and then can come out with a win this weekend.
We talked a little bit about Baylor in our undefeated segment a few weeks ago as well, and we talked about how brutal their upcoming schedule would be, and they'd not come out looking good at all, so I'm right there with you. Baker Mayfield, Joe Mixon, D.D. Westbrook has already 12 touchdowns and 1,200 yards for the Oklahoma offense receiving. So I think this Oklahoma offense, they are top 5 in the nation. Baylor certainly is not going to be the one to stop them.
It's true. This is going to be a battle of offenses, but I think Oklahoma has this one.
Oklahoma all the way.
I like it. Then moving on back to an SEC matchup, we have LSU playing at Arkansas this weekend, and this is going to be an interesting battle. We have 2 good quarterbacks, Austin Allen, Danny Etling, Raleigh Williams III versus Leonard Fournette. Who do you have in this matchup?
It's tough. I like Arkansas and I like LSU, and they're playing Arkansas at home, but I think overall LSU is just a better team. They have a great defense, and I think Danny Etling and Leonard Fournette, when you don't play against the elite Alabama defense, you could probably put some points on the board. That's
true. I think this is still going to be a close game, depending on which Arkansas defense shows up. Is it the one that had Florida to about 10 points, or is it the one that played Alabama? If Arkansas's defense can show up, be disciplined, and hold this LSU offense, I think the Arkansas offense will be good enough to carry this game, but it's really going to hinge on that. Although, I'm going to take Arkansas. I think their defense is going to show up for the second week in a row.
This will definitely play a big part in the SEC West, hopefully for second or third. We'll find out. But let's talk about the game day matchup of the week, USC at Washington. Now, we hated on USC for quite a while. They were 2-3 when we gave them the mid-season grade of a strong effort for their coach, Clay Hilton. But they're now sitting at a respectable 6-3. They won 5 straight, and now, you know, they could be doing some surprises when it comes to Washington or some other games.
That's true. They could be doing some surprises, but I don't think it's going to be this week. Washington is a very good team. They just got put in the top 4 in the playoff rankings. They beat number 17 Utah last week, and despite USC sitting at number 20, being 6-3, I think that's more a product of their easy schedule that they played in the Pac-12 so far. And I still don't think this team is very good. They've done well against some of the worst teams in the Pac-12, but remember when they go up against a ranked team, they get blown out on national television. I'm taking Washington in this one.
I agree with you. I'm going with Washington all the way. I mean, their offense, Jake Browning, he has a 34 touchdown to 3 interception ratio. I mean, that's one of the most efficient quarterbacks out there in the nation, and I don't even know who can come close to that. And Sam Darnold for USC, he's been a good quarterback too. He has 20 touchdowns to 4 interceptions, but it's not 34 touchdowns to 3 interceptions.
No, when you're comparing any Pac-12 quarterback against Jake Browning, they're going to look worse by comparison. Again, this is going to be Washington's game to lose. If they make some mistakes, they might play it close, but I'm liking Washington here.
Let's go Washington.
I like it. And next we have some quick takes. Our
Okay.
first game, Vanderbilt, Missouri. What do you got?
I'm going Vandy. I mean, Missouri, they're 0-5 right now in SEC play. Vandy, we got one SEC win against Georgia all
I
the
like
way.
it. Yep, we played close games against SEC teams. Missouri's bad. I like Vanderbilt.
Anchor down.
Like it. Next, Auburn, Georgia.
I'm going Georgia here. You know, Auburn's looking like the great team. They blew out Arkansas 50-63. But, I mean, look what Vandy did. We held them to 23-16. I think Jacob Eason for Georgia, he's a great quarterback. Nick Chubb and Stoney Michel, they're good running backs of UGA. I think they'll be able to run this Auburn defense, take out Auburn.
All right, well, I'm going to use the Vanderbilt comparison here. When Auburn played Vanderbilt, they won. When Georgia played Vanderbilt, they lost. I like Auburn. They're a good team. They sort of came back to earth last week, but I think they're still good enough to play a team like Georgia and win.
That's fair. Final quick take. South Carolina at Florida.
This isn't even a competition. This is Florida. South Carolina isn't a good team in the SEC. Florida, while they might have lost to Arkansas, is still decent. Florida.
I'd say Florida is one of the worst teams and the worst offenses, at least, in the SEC. And South Carolina, they just took out Tennessee, for goodness sake. I think we can expect South Carolina to, at the very least, make sure a close game against Florida. I'm going the Gamecocks right here.
Fair enough. We'll see if they can pull another miracle this weekend. And now we go to our special segment. Our
Election Day special. And what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at each Power 5 conference and vote on the worst team of the season so far. And we got a doozy right here, Sanjay. We collected a lot of special teams that have shown us to be the worst and the most heartbreaking out of the bunch. So we're going to go by conference, starting with the ACC. So let's take a look at the ballot we have right here. We have NC State, Boston College, Virginia, and Duke. So if you're looking at the worst team, Sanjay, who are you going to put that check mark next to?
If we're looking at the worst team, as in the team that plays the worst football, doesn't look the best in their games, Duke.
They were
What do you
3-5,
think?
but honestly, I'm going to go with Virginia here. I mean, they lost to an FCS team pretty badly. They lost to Richmond. And
See,
in my book, that's pretty garbage.
That's true, but then again, one of the losses Duke has is to that exact same Virginia team. These are both horrible teams, but I think Duke is just a bit worse. Well, they did beat their FCS opponent, and they somehow pulled off a win against Notre Dame, who is just disappointing in their own right. They have lost to Virginia. They've lost to basically every other team they've played. Their only other win came against Army, who is also just one of the worst teams in the entire FBS. They just haven't shown me anything that's good about them. Their defense is porous. It lets points up every single game. Its offense looks okay when playing terrible defenses, but the minute you give it any sort of competition, it folds.
See, in this conference, this is one of the only conferences where I'm a swing voter, and it came between Duke and Virginia. But Virginia, at the very least, I might have to go with Duke here as well. Virginia, at the very least, they're on the upside. I mean, they played Louisville, a top 5 team, extremely close, 32-25. Last-second comeback by Lamar Jackson gave them the win. So, I mean, if we're talking about good football, this is not the place you want to be. But Virginia and Duke,
Yeah, they are the worst of the bunch.
they're your special candidates.
And next, moving on to the Big 12, the teams on the ballot are Texas Tech, Kansas, and Iowa State. Now, all of these teams are not the best. What do you think is the worst?
I think we can safely eliminate Texas Tech. I mean, they can play some good football sometimes, but Patrick Mahomes, at the very least, he's an elite quarterback in this nation, so
Yes.
we'll see how well he does. But Texas Tech, for me, they're safe.
Yeah,
Iowa State and Kansas, man, whew, I'm not liking either of those. But in the long run, it's going to come to Iowa State for me. They're 1-8. Their only win is against an extremely weak San Jose State. And they're the worst Iowa. They lost to University of Iowa, and then University of Northern Iowa. And if you can't even beat an FCS Northern Iowa, you're pretty bad.
That's true, and yeah, you're right. Texas Tech, it shouldn't be lumped in with these guys. Texas Tech has bright spots. It has Patrick Mahomes, as you mentioned. Kansas and Iowa State, on the other hand, they're bad. Let me tell you, they are very, very bad.
So who are you voting for?
I'm going with Kansas here. They have the same record as Iowa State, and in their games, they have looked worse to me. While they may not have that FCS loss like like Iowa State has. When they play teams that are even average or below average, they get blown out. They don't have a defense. They really don't have an offense either. The fact that they've won any games is sort of lucky for them. I'm going with Kansas in this one.
That's fair. But, I mean, it's like you said, they beat their FCS team, Rhode Island, and they held TCU pretty close, the team that just blew out Baylor. I mean, Iowa State here, actually, they came pretty close to Baylor. So yeah, I think we'll have to roll down here. They're both pretty bad teams.
Yeah, they're both pretty bad. They're almost equally bad. We're going to have a joint worst team for the Big 12 here.
That's fair. Let's take a look at the Big 10 right now. We got some pretty interesting candidates, including some unexpected ones. We got Illinois riding at 3-6, Purdue also right there at 3-6, and then we have Michigan State and Rutgers leading the basement at 2-7 each. Sanjay, as bad as Vanderbilt can be sometimes, I'm just glad I'm not cheering for one of these four teams.
That's true. And now we're going to make a bit of differentiation here. Are we talking about the most heartbreaking team or the worst team? Because I have a team for both. For most heartbreaking, it has to be Michigan State. Mm-hmm. Last year, these guys went to the playoff. They were looking fantastic. Went to the Big Ten championship. They lost to Alabama in the end, but still, that was a very respectable way for this team to go out. This is embarrassing. Now, but on the other hand, my worst team, Purdue. This school doesn't have any talent on its football team. Sometimes these players don't really know, doesn't look like they know what playing football is.
They came for school, not football.
That is very, very true. But honestly, Purdue looked like by far the worst team in the Big Ten for me.
Yeah, I think Illinois they're pretty safe since they just beat Michigan State last week, 31-27. So they're safe. I'm not going to vote for them. Michigan State and Rutgers with 2-7. They haven't won a single Big Ten game yet. But in terms of heartbreak, Michigan State wins it. Rutgers, you have to have some expectation to heartbreak. And Rutgers has zero expectations at the beginning of the season. Everybody knew they were going to be bad. Look where they're at now. They're bad.
That's true. It's really what you expected from this team, but
I'm punching the hole in Rutgers as my worst
You're going
team.
Rutgers. I'll go with Purdue here. They are bad. I think they're going to stay bad, and I think that's just worse. And they at least had a slight glimmer of hope at the beginning of the season. That's gone, and I feel like it's just a bit worse.
Well, at least they fired their head coach, so they're moving in the right direction somewhat. We'll find out if it pays off, but it's the right direction.
Sure. And now we move on to the Pac-12, where we have some interesting candidates for this, including Oregon State, Washington State, and Utah.
All right.
Oh, and UCLA. I'm sorry.
Okay. I'm going to go, UCLA, Oregon State. Those three are pretty horrendous. And they play some pretty horrendous football. But I'm going to have to go, if we're talking heartbreaking, we're going to Oregon right here.
That's true. These guys, again, they were preseason ranked. And even as they lost their first couple games, they looked decent. And then they just slowly started tumbling further and further down until they're in almost the basement of the Pac-12. That is absolute heartbreak for a team that thought they'd be maybe not in the playoff hunt, but right below it. Mm-hmm. And honestly, but again, if we're talking about truly bad teams, you can't ignore Oregon State. Their only wins are against Idaho State and Cal. And Cal is a bit of an upset in its own right. And while they have played some close games against Stanford, Washington State, and even Utah, they still haven't, in every other game they played, they have not looked good. And while their record might be a bit harsh on them, they still deserve to be one of the worst teams in the Pac-12, but do you think they are the worst?
It's the close games that they play that makes them safe for me. And when it comes to voting, I like a candidate that can fulfill the promise, and Oregon did not fulfill the promise at all. Coming off a good year last year, they did nothing to show that they were the same team at all. So for me, I'm punching in Oregon as the worst team simply because they broke my heart into 1,000 pieces, and I do not like that at all.
That's true. I'm going to have to agree with you here. Again, Michigan State had some heartbreak of its own, but Oregon's fall looked even worse. They really didn't play close against the teams they were supposed to beat. They got absolutely demolished by teams they thought they were going to play close against. It's heartbreaking. It's bad. I'm punching my vote for Oregon.
Nice. And finally, for our last conference, the SEC. And, we've been having some ups and downs throughout the conference, but we have Mississippi State, Vanderbilt, Ole Miss, and Missouri leading the charge for worst team in the conference. And Sanjay, I'm happy to say that I will not be voting for our very own Commodores. I think we've shown ourselves, we hung tight with Auburn. We beat UGA. We have some bad losses against South Carolina and Kentucky, but, we're not bad as these other three teams.
That's true. That's true. I think we can safely eliminate us and Ole Miss. We're not the best, but we do both sitting at 4 and 5, looking at possible bowl berths. They're at least showing some promise. And honestly, I'm going to eliminate Mississippi State after this weekend. They just beat a good Texas A&M team with their dynamic offense and just took advantage of their defense. And that leaves one very obvious choice, Missouri. Again, this team was bad. They were bad last year. They were hoping for some growth this year. They haven't really seen it. This is another rebuilding year for these guys. This is going to be bad. They're going to have to get some more recruits, some more prospects. They may be 2-3 years down the line when they're ready. They can contend again, but this is going to be a rough patch for Missouri fans.
Missouri is bad, but I think I'm going to go the heartbreak route again and go with Ole Miss here. They just had some high expectations. They were up in the first half against Florida State, and then it just all collapsed around them. They have wins over Wofford. Okay, great, an FCS team. UGA, okay, they're decent. Memphis, Georgia Southern. Who are these teams? They're not good. And their losses to Florida State, Alabama, Arkansas, LSU, Auburn, they show when you face a tough team, they completely and utterly fail. And now that they lost Chad Kelly out for the season with the torn ACL, they're just, it was a pretty steep hill. Now it's just plummeting down a cliff.
All right, that's really true. This is definitely one of the most heartbreaking teams. But even still, I don't think they're the most heartbreaking team, so I can't punch my ballot in for that. I'm sticking with Missouri here. This team is bad both on offense, defense, somehow even special teams. It's over. It's Missouri for me. I'm punching my ballot.
Sanjay, we may disagree on our votes for the election day, but I think it's safe to say that we've witnessed some pretty bad football this season, and the Commodores are not one of those teams.
That's true. It's something we can all be proud of. We're 4 and 5. We have a chance at bowl games, and we're not the worst. Things are looking up for the Vanderbilt Commodores.
Anchor down, baby. Well, that's all we have for this evening. We have been Any Given Tuesday, and we have been your hosts, Evan Mercer.
And Sanjay Prasad.
Come back next week at 7, and we'll bring some more college football debate news to you. Have a good night, everybody, and have a good week.